6 minutes, so I think it's more of a challenge for you guys than for us. We've the easy job of asking the questions. Just on the DPOs, actually, the morning that maybe to reassure you a little bit, no Oireachtas committee's agenda is set in stone. It's set by us as a committee, and we can change it at any time, and we can decide to do that as a collective. The second thing is actually the morning that we were setting our agendas, that earlier that morning I had been at DPO meeting for Dublin City, at the Public Participation Network for Dublin City in the Fingus office had held a meeting, and I have to say I was blown away by the concept. I was blown away, and I think more needs to be done in terms of raising our awareness of DPOs. I have loads of questions around how that fits in with the multitude of representative organisations that are already in the space. And the one thing I would say is that, for example, in the area of meeting the real cost of disability, I did some work with different organisations in regards to the social welfare changes. There isn't a huge consensus in the space about how we can provide different levels of financial support for people who have different levels of need, and without introducing arbitrary categorisation and all of that. So actually DPOs, I think, could provide that space, and I think this committee could provide that space in a way that other organisations aren't able to. And the multi-level of need that you have people from different sectors, I think, is really interesting. And perhaps we might come back to it as a standalone meeting where we would discuss DPOs and how government agencies are engaging with those. So just a general comment on that, and we might come back to you on that. I suppose anxious maybe just to engage with Cara and Mark just in regards to the assessment of needs. I suppose I'm looking at it probably maybe in too simplistic terms, in the sense of a delivery of a public service, okay? And it shouldn't in any way differ from any other public service that we deliver. It should be delivered, and there's ways that you do that. It would appear, from what we are being told from departments and ministers and so on, there's not a financial constraint in terms of the delivery of the service. The real pinch point seems to be in the recruitment of therapists. So I suppose the law is established by us here in this House. We could change the law in the morning, we could extend the timelines, we could remove the law, and we would comply, but that wouldn't be a desired outcome. So I suppose the law is there as what should be the minimum threshold, okay? But we're not able to meet it because of a medium and longer term challenge of recruitment. And I suppose, how do we get past that is my question.
Yeah, Paul, the first starting point is this, so I'll just give our own family circumstances. We've been permanently damaged by the actions of the state. We have two profoundly intellectually disabled children, and we will have to carry the can for the next 40-odd years for the state's neglect. That creates in our house a sense of urgency. That is not there right now. So there's nobody. I could ring up several psychologists in Tipperary and say to them, please, will you work Saturdays, Sundays? We're in a serious emergency. That's not been done. Now, we tried to get that through to the Taoiseach, that's the essential component that's missing. That there is no comprehension that damage is being caused to people. They talk about this. The Taoiseach himself, when he was last Taoiseach, told us that recruitment was an issue. What has happened since the 3 years since that conversation took place? I don't want to say nothing, because that's not true. They are doing things, and I take Deputy Toole's points about the long-term issues. Our point to him is, right now, those 15,000 are condemned because there's no hope for them, and they're going to suffer damage. So unless he changes his attitude today, we're going to be talking about this next year. Yeah,
and look, and I would say I would have a different perspective on the Taoiseach's approach to this, but that might be a natural thing for us to disagree on.
Sure.
I suppose what I am focused on is, if the restriction is the recruitment at this very moment for those children at this very moment who need the assessment needs, what's the best way of deploying the state's resources? And I am struck by the 3/3 that are in this debate. A third of people who go through the entire AON process at the end don't get an outcome, in the sense that they don't reach the sufficient threshold to require an assessment of need. That's not a desired outcome for those people. They still need the interventions, but the AON, they don't get an AON. The second third is that a third of people going through the AON process are on the spectrum or within that area, and there's no alternative to them for the AON just to get a diagnosis. So in the same way as if you have another disability, there's ways to be diagnosed and for your treatment to be identified. For autism and the autism spectrum doesn't appear to be that alternative. So the AON is almost the only way of receiving that confirmation that their need is there. And the last third that I'm kind of conscious of is that a third of the man hours or woman hours of therapists is currently being undertaken on assessment of needs when we need interventions and therapies as well. So I suppose and like these limitations are the limitations we have right now. I think you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that we're not in this space in 3 years' time. But I suppose as of right now, how can we make sure that interventions are made for treatments and therapies? That's because as somebody who has some experience in that area, I want to see treatments and therapies. And maybe that's because I'm not prioritising the right thing. But to me, the treatments and therapies and the interventions have to be key.
Yeah, so I made a number of suggestions to the Taoiseach, and the first one is he did concede that they have not knocked at every single door, so that he does not know the capacity. I kind of put some pressure on him. I said, can you say what the exact capacity is? So how many psychologists are actually available? Have you contacted them? Now, I'm going to be honest, this is where you see the emergency thing comes in. He said that there'd be union issues if we start knocking on people's doors. This is the problem. They're worried about union issues rather than the permanent damage that was caused to my son. That's the problem, that they're putting like some bureaucratic issue in front of permanent damage of children. And that's where we have a problem. Like the idea that you're thinking about paperwork over permanent damage of kids, that's the problem I have with them at the moment, is that he deals with this as if it's like an office task. I see it as the permanent damage where one of my sons will be in a nappy for the rest of his life because this state couldn't do its job. That's the reality for people. When they don't get a school place, there's permanent damage caused. So I'm not sure why a person in a CF authority, and I'm trying not to be personally criticising, but it's his actions are causing permanent damage to children. I think that's your starting point. But I think you could start by knocking on the door of the over 4,000 psychologists. This is a call to emergency, a call to action. We need you. I know you take weekends off. Can you please give us weekends for 6 months? Can we clear this backlog? We've never gone to therapists. Like therapy, the HSE there's no engagement with the therapists. In South Tipperary, I brought therapists to the HSE and they now use them for other people. Why are they not using the parents to source people and even put pressure on therapists, psychologists to do more?
Thanks, Deputy.
And look, I hear your points. I suppose I'm just going back to if I was the person in charge of the service, and I'm not, but I would be looking at the blockages, and I think part of the difficulty here is the man and woman power resource seems to be the limitation.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, because this is actually, so Coru, so there's a private psychologist in Clonmel. She's 2 other psychologists working with her. She's offered them to the local HSE and they said no because they were abroad. There's this rule where you have to be in Ireland something like 3 years. So a stupid regulation. She could triple capacity. She could solve the AON crisis in Tipperary tomorrow morning, but they won't allow her. So once you have that type of bureaucracy allowed, we're in some trouble in this country.
Thanks, Martin.